Today, we are going to be taking those static PVC prop frames and we're going to be converting them into articulating, posables. And this is going to be, luckily, in time for your Halloween haunt spooktacular. Or heck, maybe there's a client project that you just want to add that extra element of surprise. We got a lot of types of joints, but three main ones that you can kind of import into your own projects to make them move more realistically. So unlike your PVC prop where you pick a position and you best like that position because it is not changing once you glue everything together, or even if you bolt it to be able to take it apart, it's just kind of there. With something like this, you're going to be able to change its position. And some of these joints, you're actually going to be able to motorize. So the first type of hinge, and if you master this joint, and I already gave it away, is the hinge. With a hinge, you can do arm movements like this and like this. So already you can have something coming at you, or like this. Zombie grabbing you. It controls legs, so you can kick, you can bend knees, so you can get a crouching position with legs and arms. You can go from sitting to standing. So hinges are probably the number one joint. With our other joint types, wow, now you're getting crazy. Settle down there. Settle down. All right. So let's start with the easiest hinge to make. So all you need is a piece of 1-inch PVC or whatever diameter you typically build your props with. So a lot of these hinges kind of revolve around the 1-inch adaptations. All right, so hinge number one is what I call the heat and pinch. And to do this, we are going to use a heat gun and basically heat the end of this until it's nice and soft. And you're going to need a clamp. And we're going to clamp the end together to kind of mush our PVC pipe. Now, when heating PVC pipe, the fumes are like nasty. So be sure to work in a well-ventilated environment. If you can do this outside, even better. So I have a little fan here. I'm going to be blowing this across my face and, putting my official goggles on, my eyeballs here. And I am not going to see anything at all. Like, I'll be heating over here. Like, are we done, guys? Are we done? Now, this heat gun has a first setting and a second setting. People, go all the way. Go big or go home. Number 2 setting. So here we go. So how do you know if you've heated it enough? Well, you can start testing it, and I can see nothing's really happening here. When I press it, it's not really compressing. So we need a lot more. And you want to do the bottom 2 inches. So you don't want to be like all up in here. You'll see the ends begin to flare out just a little bit. And also the outside coating will start to glisten. Oh yes, glisten. That's when you know you're getting close. Oh, there we go. You can see that it's getting squishy. So we're almost there. All right, this is looking pretty good. As I roll it on the table, it's feeling like really, really soft. So let's see if we can get a good pinch out of this. I'm just gonna move this over here very quickly, get this guy here, and kind of line it up as best I can. Whoop, and start to pinch. Now pinch as hard as you can, like really get that pinch going. There we go. And I'm gonna shift this aside. Now, you don't want to start moving this thing. It is like super hot and you'll get like a bended joint. So just leave everything as is. So all I'm going to do here now is just kind of douse it. And very gently, see I'm rocking. It's got a little bit of give, but we can, for the demo purposes, we can move on. I'm going to go ahead and unclamp this. The other thing that I like to do, such that these corners don't interfere with the articulation, is round them off. And how much you round them off, honestly, is really up to you. You may have to trial and error depending on how much articulation you want for your creature, your zombie, your werewolf. All right, so we have our hinge. So now I'm gonna put a hole kind of in the middle of it, and I'm gonna go perhaps, let's see here, maybe about half an inch-ish in. or maybe like something like between 3/4 and a 1/2 inch. This is not an exact science, you know, just kind of like, instead of making it right in the middle, I usually kind of err towards the outside, because if you put it in the middle, well, then the corresponding one can kind of hit these bubbles right here, like this pinch point, I guess. Now, all you would have to do then is repeat the process and create another one and then bolt them together. So you can see, because I put them on the outside, you get much better articulation versus putting the hole in the middle. Now it's like, and you might, at worst case scenario, you just got to round this off a little bit more, and you have room because the hole will be here. So you can do a ton of rounding and get it to articulate better. It's a good idea to put washers in between these two joints. That way they move a little more flexible, because you see that there's texture here and texture here. And so they can kind of get a little bit locky on each other. A little friction. 1.5 inch there should be good. All right. Maybe a little pokey out, but that's okay. That's a technical term. All right, now we're not going to bolt this super tight, but just to kind of like show you guys. Let's do maybe 2, and I'm going to do maybe larger washers. There's also locking washers. It all really depends on if you want this thing to be mobile or really, really lock it in place. Then I highly suggest swapping regular nuts for the nylon locking nuts. All right. So with the 2 washers, I usually find that's enough. Get really good movement and really smooth movement. You can put a washer here as well. It really just, you know, and a locking nut is the preferred, you know. But for demonstration purposes, you can see that if I leave the joint kind of loose, this is something that you can potentially motorize with, say, a linear actuator. You know, so you can put the linear actuator as if a bicep, right? And just actuate your arm up and down, and see how smoothly that moves. So you saw it's relatively easy to come up with, super low tech, but highly efficient and cheap, very cheap. Yeah, the cheapest. It requires 1 bolt, a nut, and some washers. All right, so fast way to do that. Now that I have made this about 1 inch, now you can take a piece of PVC coupling, and I'm not going to put it all the way in, but if I were to slide this all the way in, the coupling would kind of hit very close to here. And now you have a joint, and say I were to do it on the other side, and you can put now any length of limb that you want. And in order to secure your limb, you can use 2 screws or a through bolt. And when you're done, you can take the whole thing apart and reuse this joint for something else. Or in this particular case, they are so easy to whip up. You can just like whip up a ton and not be, you know, taking your projects apart. It makes them sad. But I don't care. And let's start on our next hinge, and I have like a fresh piece right here that we can experiment on. So, alas, when I was walking the gardening section of the home improvement store, I was in the chain link fence area, and check out what I found. This is called a chain link fence rail end, okay? Yeah, so here you put your pole for your chain link fence, and this part connects to other parts of your chain link fence. And so, you know, like kind of the crazy bag lady, I'm sitting here taking all this stuff around to different parts of the store and testing it out. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, because look, a hole, if we were to get another one, well, isn't that a hinge, guys? And it's a little bit jiggly, and you can epoxy this together and solve this, or just use 2 screws. So these are a little 1/2 inch. It just needs to pinch that PVC pipe, nothing too crazy. And since we're going to be sticking 1 on each side, if you get screws that are too big, they might collide, you know, or you can kind of like, you know, stagger them. The objective here is I'm going to drill a hole on one side and a hole on the other, 2 minimum. You can go 4 if you want, or the through bolt method and just stick a bolt right across that goes through your PVC, and that works too. This other end done. All right, so I can put this in here and we can mark up where we're going to attach it. So here and here. All right, on the other side. Yeah, I have made hinges where they're simple. My very first ones were stupid over-engineered. I mean, just unnecessary. It's in pretty well. If I ever want to undo it, you know, you can undo it. But again, in this case, what I would do is measure down 1 inch from the cap, the end of the cap right there, and cut it. Because this would allow me to slip in my 1 inch coupling and be able to put any size limb in here that I want. Done. Finito, you know? So all you have to do, just like the other one, is whip up another one of those. And luckily, you can see I already have one pre-cut and most amazing. You know, so if I were to shove this all the way in, this would most likely bump up or be very near that cap there, and it'd be ready to receive any type of limb that I want. So in order to get this to articulate, it's kind of the same deal, you know, but for this, obviously these tiny little machine screws are not going to work. So also in your chain link fence section, I found, you know, the specific screws that match up with them. So you can see that they're kind of made, so you don't really require a washer, but you can use one. It's good practice, especially if your creature is going to be receiving abuse. So, and same thing with this one. I like to let's put in some big old washers. Let's start with maybe 2 washers. So with 2 washers here, it's seeming pretty good. And same deal, you can put a washer. You can swap this for a locking nut if you really need to lock these in place. And I'm not going to go nuts with the, I'm not going to go nuts. See what I did there? Locking this up. But you can see that just like with the other hinge joint that we use, this is something that we can articulate as well. You know, so if you leave the hinge not as loose as I'm leaving it, but, you know, rather loose, it's got a very smooth articulation. Now, a third and final hinge. Now, I wasn't going to include this hinge because it's the more expensive to create. It takes more time, but I'm going to show you guys anyways. This was the very first hinge system that I created. And again, you can put a coupling in here and then attach, you know, whatever is left. But this is almost kind of like a foot and an ankle, you know, almost. This is kind of like on the border of over-engineered. Some of you are like, oh, the border, you're being kind. That's like way over-engineered. So 3 bolts. So bolts, I wouldn't say they're expensive, but they add up. This stuff like starts to add up for your project. Also, the bar holding it together, I usually prefer to work with aluminum bar stock versus steel or other varieties because they're still strong, easy to drill into, less expensive. I like going with the 1/8 inch thickness right here versus the 1/16 thickness. This kind of gives you a little bit more strength. So the idea is that you put 2 bolts on one limb and then 1 bolt on the other, and it allows it to pivot. Now, do you need 2 brackets? Not necessarily. You can probably get away with just 1 aluminum bar stock and then just, you know, squeezing the other side. Couple issues with this is that the more you squeeze to try to lock this in place, it does deform your PVC. Does it matter? It really depends on your design. So what you can do is put in a big old dowel here and drill a hole in the middle of the dowel that this can pass through. Yeah, a little bit more expensive, involves more work. You gotta cut the bar stock. You gotta line up all these holes. And you can see, because I don't have a drill press, it's not 100, like this foot is decent, this part. This one, you can see that the hole did not go through in a even manner, you know, and this is what you get. And this causes a little bit of binding, you know, which is no problem if you are going to tighten it down and it's going to be in one position. It becomes a problem if you're going to try and motorize it. So yeah, this is a hinge type I haven't used in a long time, but I just wanted to show you guys these things evolve. So don't be afraid to come up with your own hinge type. And if you don't like it, use it out of spite. That's what I did. You know, like a lot of times hinges are like, woohoo, she didn't like me, I'm not going to get used. No, now you're going to get extra used because now it's out of spite because, you know, it didn't come out good. Hinges alone are going to give your project a lot of flexibility, a lot of realism in things, but let's take it up a notch, right? So here's another movement. We got our hinges, but the human body also has pivot. So think of a skull, for instance, or an animal head. Not only can the head with a hinge look down and up by hinging, but you can combo that with a pivot joint, which now allows rotation from side to side. You know, and we have pivot joints in our body. They provide limited movement. Like you see my head, you can maybe do 180. You know, we can't exorcist, you know, unfortunately, that'd be cool, freak people out. And somewhat our elbows include kind of a pivot joint too, because you have palms down and palms up. So if you have a hinge joint, you know, we want to be able to do this too. So how do we kind of combine the hinge joint with being able to pivot like this? So the most common way to do it is what's called a pin and slot joint. Minimum of like a 1/2 inch from the bottom. All right, so what we're gonna do is take the miter saw and just kiss it. You know, we're not gonna cut all the way through. We're just gonna kiss it. Now, the more that you cut through, the more rotation you wanna get. So this could be kind of like a trial and error thing and see how much rotation. So I know that I don't wanna cut any closer to here. I wanna put my cut somewhere, you know, on this side. So here you see, I tried to make 2 cuts as close together as possible. Now the objective is to make them like literally side by side so you do not get this like little middle piece. But it is kind of tough to tell, and you can see that one cut is longer than the other. Really tough to tell. You can kind of keep going and refining, but whatever the shorter cut is where your bolt is gonna stop. Snap it off. Now the advantage of using a miter saw is that the sides here where you're going to have contact are absolutely smooth. All right. So yes, you can use a cutoff wheel like this. You know, the tough part is cutoff wheel. This always tends to melt a little bit. So you will have to take a file of some sort just to kind of smooth it out. And even when I do this with the miter saw, I do like to just kind of go in and make sure the ends are smooth. And if you want, you can take your file and file that little bit down right there so it matches the, you know, the wider cut. Up to you. I'm going to leave it. So the idea now is to find a bolt that is a good width to be able to slide. So you can just use a bolt that won't go all the way through, which is the way we're going to do it. The other idea is to drill kind of a bigger hole here where you can do a through bolt. That way there's an anchor point back here. The idea is to kind of stick this in. Now, the less it's in there, the more it's going to wobble, you know, so perhaps I will move it here and I'm going to drill just a hole right there where the barcode kind of ends. I went all the way through on this guy. You don't have to. All right, so you can see if you leave it pretty loose, that's your turning there, your pivot point. If you want to lock it in place, then you go full force with this. And then that allows you to make it a little bit tougher to turn. But if you want a little more stability, that's where making a big old hole in the back and using a through bolt. So that way on this side here, it's got something to rest on. There is still yet one super important joint of the human body. Probably, well, as you get older, you kind of notice this one a lot more. So you have your shoulders and you have your hips, right? Because unlike hinges or rotating, hips or ball joints is like almost, I'm not going to say it's endless movement, but you know, it gives you that circular type of movement. So stopping here, you're already good to go. You can make a lot of motorized movements, a lot of poses with your PVC armature. But if you want to take it a step further, this one is very difficult to motorize, but perfect for making really cool positions that you then lock into place. You can do like roundhouse kicks and stuff if you have a Chuck Norris, you know, PVC frame that you need to animate. So in order to do this, we need some kind of ball device and we need some kind of socket. Golf, anyone? Caddyshack? All right, so inspired by Caddyshack, let's see what we got here. Perhaps something like this can be our ball. So we get most of this ball in this coupling, right? Because that'll allow us to attach limbs to it this way, and we'll find a way to attach limbs to it this way. So we're gonna have to drill into this. And luckily it's kind of a hard rubber, so it's super easy to drill into. So in order to do this, you can clamp the ball down with a clamp and hold it by the clamp handle and do it. If you have a bench vise, even easier. So I'm going to bust mine out. Now mine does have a delinquency. It is not bolted down because I cannot decide where on the workbench I want to put it because each of our streams is different and I always have to move it. Now, in order for this not to do this, we're going to do the also safe round piece of PVC, you know, because that's totally steady. If you have a drill press, you just won. We're going to do this the, you know, eyeballing way. And it's okay if you depress him a little bit or compress him. Just get a good grip for now. You're going to need at least a 2.5-inch bolt. I have 3 inches lying around, so that's what we're going to use. All right, so what we're going to do is attempt to drill perpendicularly straight down. Good luck. Those of you with a drill press, I hate you. No, I love you guys. Love you guys. All right, here we go. Get your stance on. Nothing to see here. All right. Now, if you find, like mine, it's not super straight on, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's really not going to affect things too badly. Now, one of the things I'd like to do is in order to give this ball maximum mobility is to countersink the hole. So that way the bolt head sinks down to the surface. Now, if you have the proper tools for countersinking, go ahead. I'm going to show you how I do it. If I'm in a hurry and I don't feel like getting it out, you know, or if you don't have one, the idea is to take an even bigger drill bit and just drill a little bit. Just kiss it. All right, so you can see that. Got that going. So now let's drive this guy in. And again, mine is a bit long. All right, so at this point, if your screw head is still popped up and it's not like super flush, don't worry about it. We're gonna get it to cooperate here in the next step. Now that we have this thing kind of drilled in, and you know, 2.5 is probably a better way to go, we are gonna put in a nut or two. And this is gonna be like up to you. It really depends on the size bolt that you're using. If the nut is really thick, much thicker than this, you may only need one. And why are we putting a nut here? Well, it's to kind of help drive this a little bit further down, but this will also give us a little bit of clearance in our hinge. And you're gonna see this as we kind of progress further. I'm going to use 2, only because this is rather thin. And before kind of getting this guy here, it doesn't necessarily have to be a locking nut. You know, it can be, but not necessarily. And I got this here. Why don't we just use this? So you can see my bolt head is really sinking in now. See, you can almost like barely see it. And maybe I can rip this piece off. Yep. You don't want to do it to the point where you're compressing the ball, because it'll be difficult to turn it in the socket. So I'm kind of at the point where I should probably stop messing with it. Right? And that's when I mess with it a little bit more, just a little bit more, and then infinitely regret it. This is somehow going to fit in here, and it's going to roll around in there. And with our 1-inch coupling, well, that's easy. We can attach a limb here. How do we attach a limb here? You know, and that's where we put a 1-inch cap, right? And then we can attach a limb there. And now we got 2 limbs. All right, so problem solved. So what I'm going to do is drill a hole right in the middle of this limb right here. Or not the limb, the cap. And then we're going to get ready for some more heat gun action. Because we have these nuts and they're lying flush with each other, I think we're going to have way better luck pinching this by the nuts. Not very pleasant for our project, but you know, sacrifices must be made. So we want to get this decently tight because this is going to be interesting. You can see that this is not 100% straight. You can see it's a little off, but that's going to be okay. The objective is to heat this coupling up and try and expand it enough such that it'll fit 3/4 down this ball. So what I'm going to do is cut, and this is up to you. You know, pay attention where your stopper, stop ring is right there. And maybe we can use this, maybe you want to make a mark, something like this. Now, the general rule of thumb is basically the deeper your cut, the more loosey-goosiness you're going to get in that joint. So you don't want to go too crazy with this, but you don't want to be too conservative either. So if you're not sure for your test, do something, that doesn't quite go to the ring, but, maybe is 1/4 of an inch, from it, something like this. And in order to make this maybe safer, I will probably do this. That way I can back my hand away. Although I'm not gonna lie, this has been done before. Now, it will be a little bit hot, but I just go for it. All right, so let me clean that up with maybe a file. Let's see if this file will go in. All right, so we have a slit that looks pretty good, and you can experiment. Start with this. This is also going to allow this end to expand more. We're going to heat the coupling with this cut on the end, right? And then we are going to hammer it on here. Now, this is entirely too long. Now, I'm actually going to do it a different way. When you start heating this thing, this starts to kind of expand, and your driver pipe, I guess, that you're using to hit will inch its way until it's touching your ball, thus preventing the coupling from feeding into your ball. So I'm actually going to this is way too hot to hold with your bare hands. So I'm going to actually do it like this. I'm going to stick it on here, right? And then I'm going to remove this and start hammering away. I'm going to try and do it without the dummy pipe. And for here, you want to get at least the middle point and out, because that middle point's going to have to flex as well. And you'll start seeing it get shiny. As a test, you can try and bang it on your workbench, or not bang it, but just kind of press it See if it's ready. Nope, it's not. Now this is a thicker wall, so you're gonna have to hit this a little bit longer. All right, you can see it's beginning to kind of like cover the ball. So we're going to continue heating it, and you're going to notice that it's going to shrink back. It's got memory. It shrinks back, but not to worry. Oh yeah. Get mushy. Remember that your ball is rubber, so it can melt. You want to be real careful about heating it on the ball. So here's a cold, wet rag. It kind of helps to cool things off quickly so the ball doesn't become overly affected, So let's see how that looks. And it does kind of look like we're at least 3/4 over the ball. You'll see right here, you can still see the stopper ring right here. And that's important. You don't want to go past the stopper ring, because when you put in your limb, it's kind of nice to have, to have that little stopper ring right there. And of course, in this case, I don't really like using PVC glue because it's way too easy to get it on the ball, and now you've just locked your joint, So definitely here, use a through bolt that would then hold your limb in place. So here you want this to really cool off. We're going to kind of move in an expedited fashion, and just kind of see what we got going on here. It's already cool to the touch. And you can see how much our slit there that we made has already expanded. It kind of helped us get this over here. And we didn't deform this too much. So we can actually get a PVC piece right up in there. Don't worry when you first have this. Look, it's stuck. It's impossible to move. Don't worry about that just yet. It'll move. It just needs to cool off, and then it'll separate from the ball. So the other thing I like to do is to use oil. Now this is just air tool oil. You can use whatever oil you want. And when this cools a little bit, if you start to just drip oil down the sides here, this is going to loosen up your joint. But you can see how much friction, because it's grabbing onto the ball joint. Now, after it cools and you get it moving, it's too much. You're like, this is too much. I just can't, it's too much. Lightly take your Dremel tool and just open the slit up a little bit more. You can do that. Not too much, because the more you open this slit, the more it's going to start to get loosey-goosey. So say you've over-opened and you're like, oh no, it's a little more loose than I'd like it to be. Not to worry. Get a band clamp across like this and tighten it real tight, and that's going to close up this joint. So let's put together the rest of our little guy here, So I'm just going to do this, and I'm not going to go super tight on him. And there we go. And this guy's convenient. I could get my deep socket, because this is the 3-inch bolt. All right, so get that guy kind of in there. And you can see now how each end is ready to receive a 1-inch pipe. And here's your ball joint. So I'm going to start to oil it up, see if we can prematurely start to move it. In about an hour, it starts to move. So nothing to fret if it's not moving. And let's pour in little oils on the sides. And this is what makes it even more difficult to move this, because now all your hands are oiled up too. See how he's starting to move now? Get that oil. So yes, you will find that you need to oil this more beyond just this first one, because this is rubber. It's actually kind of porous, so it sucks in that delicious oil. Just like bacon, bacon oil. And you'll find that you have to oil it again, and then eventually you have something that you can move pretty easily. But you can see it's kind of snappy, so it allows you to position. And because of the slit, and see our nut situation here allows it to go into this slit, so you get a 90-degree turn, right? And so it can work like a hinge in essence, but then you can pretty much just like move it all around once it settles down. So I'm going to let this oil kind of seep in, and he is going to match his other little buddy right here that I made earlier. So you can see, look how easy this is to move. Much easier. So if yours appears stuck, not to worry, don't fret. And you can see it's still got a little bit of snap to it. So it's great for, those poses. And because of this, you can see that to motorize this is a little bit tougher. In order to motorize it, you would probably have to cut this slit a little bit deeper. So that way you get more loosey-goosiness in it. So with these joint types, you pretty much have the majority of creatures covered, unless you're making some really creepy alien that just like moves in a creepy way. Yeah, so you're gonna have to figure out those joints on your own. Or if you have questions, definitely post them in our community. The link is below. And of course, materials and even more detailed how-tos on how to build our joints on the blog. The link to that is below as well. I had a blast, guys. We are getting ready for our super haunted spooktacular or cool client projects or projects for your portfolio that you can kind of demonstrate your animatronics prowess on that stuff. So I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.